I'll call the regular city council meeting for November 24th, 2014 to order. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. It's going to be, and we're going to be led by the Webelos group that's here.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Come on up here, let's shake your hand.
Josh and Tom, getting to know these folks too.
Who are you? Nick?
Hi, I'm Molly. Thanks for coming.
What's your name? Mr. Mitchell, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Kyle, nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Lonnie. Thanks for coming tonight.
Lori, nice to meet you.
Hi.
Josh, I'm Joe.
What's your name? Kyle, I'm Lonnie. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Let us know we can
job. Thanks, good job.
We can interact with your group, with the Scouts or the Cubs. We'd be happy to do it. Well, thanks for what you do.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
It's gutsy. I would have been scooping in at 12 or 10 or whatever. It's cute. Thanks for bringing it in.
Super fun.
Well, we'll continue with the meeting. The next order of business is to adopt the agenda. Are there any changes, Lori? No? We have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've adopted the agenda. Next item is an open forum. It's an opportunity for citizens to address the council on topics not on the current agenda. Anybody wish to address the council? Seeing none, we'll move on. No visitors' presentation. Next is the consent agenda, where all items on the consent agenda are approved with one motion, unless a council member wishes to withdraw an item. Lonnie?
I'd like to withdraw the minutes of November 10th, 2014 City Council Workshop.
And I would like to withdraw them from the meeting.
All right, can we have a motion to adopt the amended consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the amended consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've adopted the amended consent agenda. Next is the minutes of the November 10th, 2014 City Council Workshop. Lonnie?
This might actually require a little bit of work after the meeting with our recorders, because I found a statement regarding, let's see, it would be page 2 of the City Council Workshop, paragraph 3, change, council member Bassa stated there would be leftover issues with interim manager Strukel can provide input, and I believe I actually said manager Urim for that discussion in that particular piece. And then there's a further statement on page 7 that I just want to go through notes to be sure that it's correct, because it's the last 2 paragraphs of that particular page that I think misstates the conversation slightly from what we had, saying in terms of that we hold those conversations and we don't hold those conversations. I just want to make sure I walk through that. So I don't know if that's appropriate to do in that way afterwards, or to re-listen to. I believe we recorded it, so we could capture the correct statement from the recording.
So your suggestion would table this, give you a chance to work with staff to
Just
get
to
it,
re-correct
and then bring it
that
back at the next meeting?
paragraph, yeah.
Well, I'll make a motion to table the minutes of the November 10th, 2014 City Council Workshop.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've tabled that to the next meeting. Jim, you wanted to talk about the minutes of the council meeting?
Yes, I'm looking in the council packet, or at least the electronic version, on page 27. It's marked at the top as page 13 in the last paragraph. sentence says, "He stated there is a property potentially for sale in downtown, and the seller has indicated he would welcome an opportunity." Actually, the conversation is with Carver County, and he stated it was the CDA, director of the CDA. It should state, "He stated there is a property potentially for sale, and the CDA has indicated they would welcome the opportunity." I have not spoken to the property owner.
So we got, you want to make a motion, then we'll,
I move we approve the amended minutes from November 10, 2014.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We've approved the minutes for that meeting, and we already approved the amended consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask something?
Sure.
Is it normal, and maybe this goes to our attorney, is it normal that cities take these kind of quasi-verbatim meeting minutes? I mean, it seems like we're kind of, I mean, to really do this, you'd have to go back and listen to the tape or watch the tape and go word for word. And it just seems like it's not a waste of time, but just, there should be a better way to do it so that, you know, because like you can read this and go, I actually meant this, or it just doesn't seem like this is efficient.
Yeah.
Is there a different way to do this?
Mayor, council members, I wouldn't want to say that it's normal. It's not abnormal. There are plenty of cities that have sort of verbatim or semi-verbatim minutes taken. I think it's becoming a little bit less common because we videotape meetings now, and the videotapes of these council meetings are themselves public records. So there's always sort of a permanent record of literally a verbatim transcript of what happened. So it's a somewhat diminishing thing. The only thing I would say about your minute keeping is, and I think you all understand this, is that the minutes may be factually inaccurate, but if they properly reflect what was said, they are correct. That is to say, you don't correct the minutes to be right, you make the minutes say what people said, even if they said something wrong. They then may have the opportunity to change that at some subsequent meeting. But so that's the only important thing from the legal perspective, is that the minutes need to reflect what happened, not what in retrospect you wish had happened or something like that.
Because
So.
I guess my problem is, you know, it's just, I'm not going to sit down and watch our meeting and go through this word for word and make sure that it's, and so then the problem is so at the next meeting when we go back and we approve this and, you know, it wasn't technically exact, are we doing something wrong?
Well, so to a certain extent, I think I would agree with you, Councilmember Pavelko, but given the current legal issues, I think it's really important that we review what we said, and if it's incorrect, that we make a correction.
I agree. That's why I also called for the correction, because I know that these meeting minutes in this format are used as sort of gospel until someone can take the time to sit down and go through the tapes. And I know that's not what the statement was in the meeting about what I know I called out, so I wanted to make sure it's corrected.
We already have enough comments being taken out of context.
Right.
It's important that we represent the context as it was.
So when there's a discrepancy from the video to this, what happens?
Well, Mayor and council members, I guess it depends on what context that discrepancy comes up, but basically the minutes are still the official record of the meeting, and so, I mean, that statement stands for itself, that they become the official record, because of course you don't go back and approve or accept or even review as a group the videotape, you only look at the minutes. So legally speaking, that this is your record of the meeting. Could someone go back to the videotape and raise a discrepancy? Sure, that's theoretically possible.
Okay, thank you.
It may be a little bit cumbersome, but is there a better process?
Well, Mayor and Council, it's a good question, and it's come up obviously with a number of our clients. I think there are competing arguments about whether really minimal minutes about, you know, sort of the item was this, the resolution was this, it was moved and seconded and approved. I mean, they can be that skeleton up to and including what you do, which is almost a verbatim transcript, and everything in between. I've seen all of those. There are competing reasons to do it one way or another. I mean, one is obviously efficiency. It's easier and more efficient to just have very minimal minutes. There are competing reasons that you want to have a full, complete, accurate record of everything that everybody said. That is, at the end of the day, a policy decision. For the city, you got to weigh the amount of money you spend on transcribing and the importance of getting it right and all of those issues. I can help you work through that if you want to take a look at that. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, that's a policy decision that involves money and those decisions.
Yeah, how do people feel about that?
I would like to continue with the existing process for now.
Yeah, I think, and you touched on it, Jim, and given the events of the past 2 years, it behooves all of us to make sure that what is reflected in the minutes is what was accurately reflects what was said. And we can always, if you don't have, we can always go back to the video if we need to refresh our memories. But I know as I read through these, I tend to focus on not the byplay necessarily, but the conclusions, and make sure that the conclusions and the recommendations are accurate. But we each have to do it in our own way, and unless anybody objects, I recommend we just continue to do the quote semi-verbatim approach to keeping the transcript.
Yeah, I tend to think that this is a good summary that gives you the gist of what happened, but I do think it's important. I know I go through and review all my statements to make sure that, even if not directly word for word, that they do at least reflect the sentiment and the intent of my comments.
Yeah, and I guess, I do the same thing, not that I don't review them, but I don't go back and go, okay, did I say, the instead of the, or, I don't do that, and if I did that, I know that there would be some differences there, and so I just wanted to make sure that we're okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We've tabled one, and we've approved the other minutes, and we've approved the amended consent agenda. Next, we move to the payment of the bills, the claims roster.
I'll move payment of the claims roster in the amount of $1,285,2.31.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We've approved the claims roster. Next item is for information only. It's the 2013 third quarter financial report. Kelly, did you want to go through any of that?
Mayor and Council, I thought I would briefly touch on some of the highlights if you'd like to go through that.
Please.
Okay. The Finance Committee did review this report as well last Wednesday, and I'll just touch on some of the highlights. So looking at the general fund, that would be page 1 of the report. And the top line is our taxes and franchise fees. I'm projecting that we are going to be over for the year. Our levy and tax income is coming in as scheduled, but our franchise fees, we're going to be over about $12,000 for the year. Since this was the first year that we've had franchise fees coming in, we had to do a bit of an educated guess. So we've increased the budget for 2015 accordingly for that. We talked a little bit about building permit revenue during the workshop. We are going to be over for building permit revenue for a couple of reasons. Number one, the number of new homes we projected. We had projected 75 new homes. We are well over that through the third quarter. And then we also did approve an increase in building permit fees. Any excess revenue from building permit revenue does go into our revenue stabilization fund, which will be good since we will be using most of the revenue stabilization fund for our construction projects. For expenditures, I'm projecting that we are going to be under budget for the year, probably within $100,000 of our budget, however. The reason for the unspent money is largely the result of a half-time open position that we have not filled, and a few other items. Looking at the other departments and where they're at through the third quarter, things are trending about where we would expect. This chart just shows our building permit revenues through the third quarter. We had budgeted for roughly $420,000 in revenue, and through the third quarter, we're at about $442,000. So I'm projecting we'll probably be close to about $600,000 by year end, which would allow about a $200,000 transfer into the revenue stabilization fund. Now, in looking at the recreation center, again, we expect revenues will exceed our budget for the year, and that's largely due to increases in membership. Our expenses are at about 65% through the third quarter. We should be close to 100% by year end, and that's largely due to timing of invoices. At the end of the year, we'll get a number of invoices that were incurred in 2014 that we'll have to add into our expenditure totals.
Kelly, can I ask a question on the rec center? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At our Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday, I had asked a question about the generator that we had purchased and whether or not we were getting any savings by doing that, and I'm wondering if you found out anything on that, or just maybe by next meeting we get some more information on if that's actually saving us money.
Yes, I did not get a chance to look that up yet, but I will. I'll check in with Ann and make sure we have those numbers for the next meeting.
Okay.
I know we are getting the correct rate. We just need to make sure that we're getting the overall projected savings that we thought we would when we signed up for the generators. So.
Thank you.
And then looking at the water fund, we will be under budget for water sales for the year. And again, we touched on this a little bit during the workshop, but our overall water use was down for the third quarter, which is a good thing because we'd like to get some conservation effect.
Kelly, can I interrupt you for just a second, because I actually had a question back on the rec center still. I noticed that the gym rentals revenue looks like it's substantially short of where we thought it would be, and I'm wondering if that was impacted by availability due to the fire.
I think there is a little bit of that coming into play, and then also with gym rentals, we tend to wait sometimes up to a couple of months between billings for some of our large users, so we usually see a large influx of gym rental fees coming in at year end as we finalize all the different bills for the different groups that come in.
I see.
I suspect we'll be close to our total for the year, but given the amount of time we were shut down, we'll probably be short a little bit. And Ann might have more to say about that.
Yeah, so that's kind of the next question. Does our contractor compensate us for loss of use?
Mr. Mayor, council members, the gym rental, obviously the summer is kind of our downtime, so we will start picking up again starting usually in October through the end of the year, where we will pick up a lot of that revenue. We really lost minimal time in the gym for rental purposes when we were redoing the floor. So it was minimal. If there was, 10 hours, I would be surprised.
Okay, thank you.
So we will pick up, though, from now until the end of the year.
Okay, so then looking at the water fund, we will be significantly over budget for our water connection charges and especially our water availability charges. The water connection charges are paid at the time a building permit is taken out for property, and since we have more new homes coming in than we budgeted, that number is higher. And then the water availability charge is paid by the developer at the time a development agreement is filed. And with the number of new plats we've had this year, that is the reason for the large increase for that account. Otherwise, our expenses are trending as we would expect, and our overall cash flow projections are what we'd expect. Again, they're higher given the increase in the water core and availability charges. For the sewer fund, we're on track for the year. Through the third quarter, we had received about 77% of our budget for charges for service. And similar to water, our sewer connection charges are higher due to the number of new homes that we've had come in. Our sewer operating expenses are about where we would expect them to be. We're pretty close to budget. However, for our sewer core charges, we will be over budget due to the Wasserman project. We had some issues with poor soils and then some significant expenses due to the easement condemnation hearings. For stormwater, again, revenues are on track. We're close to 77% for revenues through the third quarter. Our expenses have been lower throughout the year. We tend to do some maintenance in the fall and winter months, weather permitting, and we also tend to budget a little more for maintenance just due to unknowns in the event we had to do work with a pond that we weren't expecting. So overall, the cash flow looks good for that fund. Looking at the utility billing report, we've already kind of talked about overall revenues. I guess the one item I would highlight is our water pumped versus billed statistics. 2012 was our high point for the third quarter in terms of usage. We billed 147 million gallons that year. We dropped down to 139 million gallons in 2013. And then for 2014, we've billed out for about 118 million gallons. And then I'll also talk a little bit about our new payment service for utilities. We switched over our processing for credit cards to Payment Services Network. And we've had a very good response with that. We've had a number of people sign up for that. The cost to process credit cards with them is about a third of the cost we had before. And then we also had a number of people sign up for automatic payment through checks, which is an even lower fee. So that conversion went very well.
Kelly, I have a question. On the pumped versus billed, could you explain a little bit more about the discrepancy of, in this case, the overage? We billed more than we pumped in the quarter?
Part of it has to do with the timing of when we read meters. We typically read meters around the 25th of the month versus the pumped numbers are coming from the first of the month. So there is a little bit of a timing issue. For this particular quarter, we tend to bill out more just because of that timing. However, when you look at the other months of the year, it tends to be a negative number where we're underbilling for water. When you look at it throughout the course of the year, we typically are underbilled for a portion of the year just because there is some water that's lost in production and running it through the treatment plant. But it's not uncommon for us to have an overbilled percentage for the third quarter because of that timing difference.
Thank you.
Page 8 shows the different cash balances by fund. There aren't any surprises here. A lot of our funds rely on property tax settlements, and our second half settlement will not come in until December. So a lot of the funds have decreased throughout the year, and that will come up again once we get that second half property tax settlement. This is the one I'm probably most excited about because we actually have a little more interest earnings going on since we have finalized our financing for the Public Works and City Hall. We've been able to invest our funds a little bit more. CDs aren't yielding great, but we've been able to increase our interest rate up a little bit to where some of them are now actually getting over 1%. So this just shows a breakdown of where we have our money. When we do invest, we have to invest according to safety, liquidity, and yield, and in that order. So that really limits how much we can do, but this has improved, so it's nice to see that. Page 10 just kind of gives a recap of the different capital improvement plan items that we have. We had mentioned earlier about a couple of items being deferred, the Allegheny Trail project being deferred, and then also the Deer Run fence is another one that we're going to be deferring. It says fall project on here, and since I completed the report, we've actually decided that's going to have to wait till next year. So what we'll probably do is recommend that we assign a portion of our fund balance from this year to finish up that project in 2015. Both City Hall and Public Works are coming in according to budget. The project budget listed on here is just the construction of the buildings. It does not include any of the site purchase or site preparation, things that are outside of the scope of those two buildings. And then the Arboretum Trail project, we'll be working on finishing that up and getting our state grant money towards that project before year end. And then the last page, page 11, just shows our bonds outstanding. We did close on the City Hall bonds in September, so we have the new amount added in there. And then looking at the long-term trend, we do expect our outstanding bonds to decrease each year through 2032, both as we pay off principal and then as we add new debt for various street reconstruction projects. So are there any questions about the third quarter financial report?
No, thank you, Kelly. We'll move on to donations.
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 14-94, a resolution accepting donations from the following donors: from the Victoria Business Owners Association in the amount of $250 to the Park and Recreation Department. Also from the Victoria Business Owners Association, $250 designated to the Fire Department.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
We've accepted the donations. Thank you to the VBA. We have no public hearing tonight. We have unfinished business. Lori?
Go to Ben.
Go to Ben.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, before you tonight for this
You're
next
really
item is
good.
the Hawks Point preliminary plat. It's located off of Highway 7 and it's brought forward tonight by Charles Cudenovo. As you can see by the map up here on the screen, it's located in the northern portion of the community, and it's one of Victoria's last large developable parcels between State Highway 7 and Lake Minnetonka. The property itself is 21.43 acres in size. It is zoned Lake Minnetonka residential. Importantly, by your comprehensive plan, it is guided for the type of development that's proposed here tonight. And I'd also point out that unlike a lot of developments we've seen recently, this is straight zoning. We have no variances before you tonight, and this is not a PUD. With this particular development, they are going to be dedicating 2.96 acres of right-of-way. As you can see on this slide, the area next to State Highway 7 in yellow is for MnDOT. That would be 1.62 acres. And then the city right-of-way would be 1.34 acres. The applicant is also going to be creating two outlots with this development, A and B, both right on State Highway 7. Outlot A is going to be the location of the new stormwater pond for this development, and Outlot B is really intended for open space preservation and to protect the trees that are on that hillside to provide privacy for this development into the future. Now, the applicants are only seeking to plat 13 lots now instead of the 15 they were originally envisioning, and that's largely because of bluffs. If you recall a concept plan, we stated that bluffs would need to be identified. The applicant went through and, as you see here, identified exactly where that bluff line is. So now we can confirm that all 13 building pads are going to be outside of that bluff, and all 13 homes can be built outside of the required setback and bluff impact zone. Furthermore, all of the lot standards required by your code are being met, and there really isn't anything out of the ordinary as far as how these lots are going to develop. The proposed lot arrangement that you see here is going to fully subdivide the property, and development as proposed is not going to impact current or future development of any of the surrounding lands. Moving on to infrastructure, I would note that the one new local roadway is going to intersect Highway 7 at the existing private driveway entrance onto the highway. They do not have a name for the road on the preliminary plat right now. By code, that has to be designated at final plat, but right now they're considering Hawks Point Lane, so you can anticipate that as the road name. The applicant is currently preparing all of the engineered plan sets to provide to MnDOT to show how this intersection will work. We fully anticipate there'll be required turn lanes from both directions. Because those plans aren't ready at this particular point in time, we are recommending that any approval by council be conditioned upon three things. Number one, that MnDOT approve the access point location as currently proposed. Number two, that MnDOT approve the Highway 7 improvement plans incorporating all of the required improvements to make sure safety is intact. And number three, that the highway improvements be completed on a time frame as designated by MnDOT. Other things to note would include the existing gravel driveway that follows the creek on the western boundary of the property. Will not change. That's going to remain as is. There was a concern that was brought up by the public during the concept plan as to how snow plowing will continue to be occurring out there, and that will occur as it always has. The city will maintain up to the lift station, and then the private property owners will maintain beyond that. The street that's proposed is going to be built per the city's typical section, and really the only thing unique about this particular roadway is that they are proposing to dedicate 50 feet of right-of-way instead of 60 feet of right-of-way. And that's really intended to reduce impacts on this property related to steep slopes and the bluffs. Per the engineer, this 50-foot right-of-way is going to be adequate. This is a very low volume road, and that's consistent with past practice and in similar circumstances. With regards to water, right now the applicant is proposing to use wells on the individual lots, although a 12-inch line is available to the southeast of this property. I know the applicant is considering hooking up to that, and should they choose to service this with city water, they would need to provide us with full plan sets going into final plat. With regards to sanitary sewer, both engineering and public works did look at both lift stations number 3 and 4, and they determined that there is adequate capacity to accommodate the additional flows. And here was another one of the main concerns from the public. How might these lift stations change? There will not be any major visible upgrades to either of these stations, so that concern has been addressed. Moving on to stormwater, engineering didn't identify any concerns about the preliminary design, but they do state that a detailed stormwater management plan needs to be provided to the city for review at the time of final plat. The one main change that we note on stormwater management is that concept plan. They were proposing to have the pond in the southwestern corner, and now it's down in the southeastern corner. The city engineer is present to talk about stormwater management or any of the infrastructure should you have questions about those aspects. Moving on to environmental issues, the proposed number of lots before you tonight did not trigger the need for an EAW, and in our review we didn't see anything that was really unique that deserved further environmental study. We did require that the applicant do a wetland delineation. Kellogg Environmental Services has provided us with a report, and they confirmed that there are no wetlands on the site. which is why you don't see any outlots to accommodate wetlands. Nearly all of the property, as you can see on this slide, is within the shoreline district. We have shoreline district from Lake Minnetonka of 1,000 feet, and then from the creek connecting Schutt's Lake to Lake Minnetonka, that's a 300-foot buffer. So really the only area of this property that's outside of the shoreline district is right down by the entry point, and every one of the lot pads is within the shoreline district. So we have to look at every lot as it relates to shoreline district requirements, and all lots are in conformance with your existing code. And the only real thing to note with regards to this is that the maximum impervious surface on each lot goes down to 25% rather than the normal 35% in the LMR district. With regards to tree preservation, the applicant did provide us with a full inventory. They did a mensuration method on much of the property and the steep slopes and in the bluff areas, and then they had a detailed inventory for all of the areas that are proposed for disturbance. And based on the analysis by their consulting company TreeBiz, they estimated the number of inches on the site was a little over 19,000, and the estimated inches lost will be about 5,600. So going into the code, we see that a replacement rate of 0.3 inches would be required. So we estimate that 1,691.4 replacement caliper inches are going to be required for this particular lot layout. They did provide us with a planting plan that's before you tonight that identifies 146 caliper inches to be planted. So the remaining inches either need to be planted off-site or they will need to pay the cash in lieu amount for that. Park dedication in this case is planned to be met through cash in lieu of land based on 11% of the market value, and that would be determined at final plat per your code and state statute. And then finally, the park facilities improvement fee of $2,500 per lot is going to apply here. In conclusion, council is asked to examine the proposed preliminary plat and make a decision of approval or denial. Council's options tonight are approval, denial, or you may table the request if you feel additional information is necessary. Decision on this one does need to be made by December 14th, but we can extend that an additional 60 days if we need the time. Both staff and the Planning Commission are recommending approval of the preliminary plat here tonight, subject to the conditions and the findings that are listed in the report. We do provide you with motion templates on page 12 of the report. We have recommended conditions on pages 12 through 15. And then following the report, you'll find the suggested resolution, the engineer's memo, and then the plan sets. And with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you, Ben. Questions?
I have a couple questions with respect to Park and Trail. So I understand how they're addressing the dedication and the fees, but I am interested to understand if any park facilities will be relatively immediately accessible by this development. If there are anything in the, where would be their designated park and how would they get to it?
I am not extremely familiar with your park setting, given that I haven't been here long enough to know exactly where those are at. I do know from Ms. Kreff's initial report here that in looking at the park plan for the city, there was nothing designated or planned for this area, which is why the recommendation for cash in lieu came down. I can also say that the public did request that the Planning Commission take a look at potentially acquiring an easement for a trail along State Highway 7. And the Commission said that had been looked at a number of times in the past, and that different impediments, both to the north and south, really dictated that a trail was not feasible, so they did not recommend that particular easement.
So I picked that up from the report, at least as far as immediately adjacent to Highway 7. Are there any other access plans for a trail at any other part of the development or any part of the neighborhood? I think, we've heard off and on from other residents on the north side of Highway 7 that their ability to reach the regional trail and just connect to the city is pretty limited. Are we missing a need here by not incorporating something into this?
There very well may be a need, but I will go with the Planning Commission's recommendation and how they described it to me. It might be a need that cannot be easily met, just given physical limitations to get up there.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Ben, the closest park really would be South Lake Virginia Shores,
Okay.
and I believe that's right. it's not a simple walk, but it's, and you want to comment?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, council members, South Lake Virginia Shores Park is the closest park facility here. It's probably about a half a mile to 3/4 of a mile east of this location. Certainly one of the challenges with locating a trail in this area is private property, MnDOT right-of-way, slopes, wetlands. I did get a call today from a resident asking about the possibility of a trail. And one of the things that we may need to look at in this location is within MnDOT right-of-way. I know the Carver County plan and even the city plan has a trail identified in this location, just in general terms, but probably in this location we'd have to look at MnDOT right-of-way for placing that, just due to all the constraints that this property has and that whole stretch of Highway 7.
And the likelihood of success is?
It's just money.
Yeah.
You have a chance. If you submit and put it in, there's always a chance of being able to get grants. And I know with working with the last trail we put in, we needed to work with MnDOT there as well, so along Highway 5. And that's in. So.
I have another question related to retaining walls. And so I understand that there are a number of retaining walls due to the slopes that are included in this plan. And so I think they become in the right of way, they become city assets, I think, once the development is done. So I'm interested in what the life expectancy and kind of what the replacement guidelines are for these kinds of retaining walls, and then, you know, what is the builder's warranty on something like that? What are we taking on when we do that?
My name is Rick Denman. I'm with Charles Cudd de Novo, and thank you for your question. The retaining walls that we would put in would be engineered where necessary, and the warranties, I imagine, would go as far as the engineering would. If that wall failed, we'd have an opportunity to go back and have that repaired for some period of time, but that's something I would have to check on. I don't know, is that actually in the city right away, the retaining walls?
Well, it sounds like there are some that could be on private property, some that in the city right away, and I note that the desire is to not have them cross from one to the other, so I guess to avoid any question of ownership. And so that's my question, is what are we going to own, and what does that mean kind of in long-term liability?
Well, I probably don't have a good answer for you on long-term liability on those walls. It may be something we'd have to put in a homeowners association document or something to that effect.
Thank you.
How about the first part of Tom's question, the ownership? Do we know who would own the retaining walls?
I don't have the ability to zoom in on here. If I remember the plans correctly, they are just outside of the right-of-way, mostly on this outlot B, as it would be, and then on this would be lot 1, Rick?
Yes. Yeah, you can see from the plat that probably if 2/3 of them, well, that's a good point. Yeah, they may be in the right-of-way of that road. They may be just outside of that. That's something we'd have to check on. So maybe that's a...
I'd just like to understand, you know, and then kind of what's the life expectancy of a wall of that kind. I understand it's an engineered and it's maybe 25 or 50 years, something, but...
Yeah, well, they'll last a very long time if they're put in correctly, and if they're engineered walls, which a good part of this wall will be engineered because it's going to be over 4 feet tall, it should last a very long time. I don't have any historical data on how long that wall would last, but I'm sure an engineering firm could probably give us some feedback on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we have other areas in the city where we own retaining walls that we have to maintain?
If I can pose that question to our city engineer, Kara Guerin.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is totally typical of all of our new developments. We have many retaining walls in the city due to the topography with the city. We always work with the developer to try to minimize the amount that end up in the right-of-way. But then, when they are in the right-of-way and on private property, they do have to meet city ordinances for design. So when they're over 4 feet, they're designed by a licensed structural engineer. The city reviews those plans, not from a structural engineering perspective, but to make sure that they were in fact designed by a qualified structural engineer. And then we do take ownership of the ones that are located on city right-of-way. So we have a number of them. Public Works keeps an eye on them. We'll do whatever maintenance is needed. We just had one this year that needed some maintenance done on it. That was pretty minor, but it is a reality in our city with our topography.
And generally not an excessive risk in your judgment?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Well, I'm going to voice a concern, something that really troubles me. What's the mailing address for the folks, these 13 homes?
The mailing address?
Yes.
Victoria, I believe.
It'll be Excelsior, isn't it? Yeah.
Why?
You know, again, I'm not sure what, I'll let Kara or somebody on the staff prepare an answer. I'll give you 2 or 3 seconds while I whine about this. You know, we're roughly 10 square miles of city, and there's this dichotomy. There's everything in the south along the core downtown, and then there's a series of roads that take us up to the Smithtown Road, and then the north side, or up to Route 7. We're trying to make one city. We're trying to be one city. We're trying to be inclusive, and then to have the mailing address not reflect that, it's maddening. And I understand we have the same thing with Cheval, where we just approved 40-plus homes, and they're going to have a Chaska mailing address, and yet they pay taxes. Hopefully, they don't get that wrong. They pay taxes to the... Are we really without any recourse? Are we really at the mercy of the federal government or the Postal Service? Or, I mean, who makes those rules? I would like to change them.
Mayor, I can comment on that. Jenny Kresh and I looked into that, and we are at the mercy of the post office and the federal government. Those boundary lines were drawn long ago, and it literally takes an act of Congress to change them. And they're not apt to do that because for every city that's happy with the way they are, there's probably 2 that are not. If you just think about the metro, Chanhassen has Excelsior and Chaska zip codes. You have many Lakeville addresses that have Farmington zip codes. So it's not even always that the smaller community takes on the identity in terms of mailing address of a larger one. It just depends on where you fall in this predetermined zip code map. And so we could approach our Congress representatives, but historically it has not proved to yield results. However, in terms of taxes and who responds if they have a fire or have a emergency needing a police response, all of that gets geocoded into our various dispatch and computer services. So we definitely will get their taxes, and we definitely will send our emergency response personnel if they have a call at their home. And we'll work hard to make sure that they understand that they're Victoria residents and they share in our community pride. But I agree, the mailing address can be a steep challenge.
But at least from emergency services and some of the other more important issues, getting taxes, of course. There's no confusion. They're part of Victoria. It's
right.
All right, I'm done whining.
It will be something interesting to watch, though, because I think we at least have 3 other zip codes that we support right now. I don't know if there's more than that, but I know besides Victoria, there's 3 other ones. So.
Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 14-95, a resolution approving a preliminary plat for Hawks Point as submitted by Charles Cudd de Novo for property located at 1190 and 1200 State Highway 7.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Do we need to say subject to the conditions listed within the staff report as they may have been listed?
Yes.
Are those conditions different than the 12 that are listed in the resolution?
I believe they're the same.
There's 16, 17, 20, There are 26 conditions listed in the resolution.
That sounds much better, yeah.
You identified or included in that list.
They're in there.
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah,
So the-
specifically the DOT.
yes,
So the resolution as stated is accurate,
yes.
so you don't have to amend it.
Okay.
We have a motion on the floor, and then somebody want us to make a second? You did second it? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We've approved the Hawks Point. We look forward to seeing the final plat.
Thank you.
The City Hall Library October payment request.
Kara Gerens is going to present the payment request, and then we also had talked at our last meeting about talking a little more in depth about where we are on the projects overall, so she will do that as well.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Welcome, Kara.
Sorry for my shuffling around as I get resettled in here. So, first of all, just the basic topics to cover on this agenda item are our routine monthly payment to both the various contractors for the project, this month in the amount of $328,660.10, and then also our monthly payment to Stahl Construction for general conditions for last month, and that amount is $8,746.57. So that is just our routine payment. There isn't anything unusual on this month's pay request from the contractors or from Stahl. Just briefly, a project update. I don't know how many of you had an opportunity yet to go tour the building, but I highly recommend you consider doing it if you haven't. I think those who've been there have enjoyed the opportunity, as it's starting to actually look like an actual place where we'll all soon be working. But mudding and taping of City Hall is complete. The EFIS installation was underway. I didn't get by the building today, but it's my understanding that a lot of the structural elements that we had up to heat in order to help us pour sidewalk are now down. So I think you can get a pretty good look at the exterior of the building now if you go by. The concrete sidewalk is nearly finished. There might be one little square left that they needed to wait to pour until the EFIS was complete. So that's good news. But we wanted to spend some time today talking about the project budget. So included in your packet, and this covers both buildings now, is the overall summary of costs that we've been working on since as far back as I can remember. So these were the same detailed summarized line items that we had back when I first was presenting the budget before we awarded a contract. So these are the same line items. As was the case back then, as is the case now, there is a whole lot of detail behind each one of these line items, so we're not just looking at it at this high of a level. We are looking at the detailed items that make up some of these line items. So the building and site construction costs, those reflect what was actually awarded to all the contractors for the construction work. General conditions is costs that that's being paid to Stahl for the general conditions items that they're responsible on the site. So that might be things like disposing of trash, insurance, things of that nature. The third line item down reflects change orders that have been approved for both buildings. This is a large number because it includes the roughly $100,000 to relocate the building at the Public Works site. If you recall, that was actually a change order when we approved it. But the line below that is really what we have left in our construction contingency as of today. So based on the information that as of when I put the packet together, so last Thursday. There's about $44,000 left in our contingency for the projects. And then the rest of the line items are a variety of items pertaining to both buildings. One of the largest areas is the miscellaneous cost line item, and that refers to all the furniture that we've purchased for the buildings. It refers to equipment that's being purchased for the Public Works building, so the overhead crane, hoist, that whole long list of items that Ann brought forward for approval a couple of months ago now. There's still some equipment items that she's continuing to work on that continue to come forward. Technology, that includes that AV work that you approved last month, last council meeting. Moving costs, we're still working on those. We're in the process of obtaining quotes. So in a lot of ways, I think that budget was just under 500,000. I do think we're trending under on that one based on what we've approved to date, but we're still working through the various items that need to be purchased. Fees for SAC and building surcharge costs were what we expected, and then professional fees, we had originally separated those out between what we were paying for Medine, Brunton, and Stahl, and the other is really like the surveying that we had to get completed on the site, some testing we had to get completed on the site, and then we separated out what we had paid to Architectural Alliance prior to relocating to the new site, my time, and legal fees. So that one, those costs are trending up a little bit over what we had originally estimated, partially because I don't think the city anticipated that I would have nearly the involvement that I had in the City Hall project. I think the former city manager was going to be doing a lot of the things that I've been doing, so that wasn't originally anticipated in the budget. But overall, we continue to be trending within budget with the savings that we've had on some of the other items offsetting some of the ads that we're anticipating coming our way. And I guess with that, I'll see if there's any questions.
Questions? I'll make a motion to authorize payment in the amount of $328,660.10 for the contractors and $8,746.57 for Stahl Construction.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We've approved the contractor and Stahl payment.
The next item, which follows suit to the first item, is the pay request for the Public Works facility. This month, we are looking at paying $522,049.67 for the contractors, and then $9,250.86 for Stahl Construction. This project is really approaching completion. The contractors are just working on finishing up some outstanding items. I can't see Ann, but I'd maybe ask her to provide a more current update than what I had last Thursday.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, we are actually closing in very close to a move-in date. I'm hopeful that that first week of December, we are going to be able to start moving equipment in. Just this last week, they actually started the boiler for the in-floor heat. We installed the crane and hoist, the vehicle lift. The bathrooms are finally coming together and showers. Fuel tanks have been hooked up. So there's just a lot of oddball little things that at the end of a construction project that you run into. So we're hoping yet this week to do a preliminary walkthrough of the building. But yeah, occupancy is looking like hopefully by that, no later than that second week of December. So we are on track. And it's exciting. So, and if anybody wants to come out and take a look at the building, I'd be happy to show it to you.
And there's even heat.
Yes. I was getting a little nervous about that, but they got it started last week, so yeah.
Fantastic.
Any questions or comments for Ann or Kara? We'll have somebody make a motion and we'll pay these folks.
I move that we authorize payment in the amount of $522,049.67 for the contractors and $9,250.86 for Stahl Construction.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We paid the contractors. We have no new business. We'll turn to the city manager.
Great, thank you. First, I wanted to thank everyone for the warm welcome they've given me over the last 2 weeks. Last Monday, we had a welcome reception, and a number of residents and businesses came out to say hello and introduce themselves. And additionally, I've had phone calls and people stopping by, and it's just been a great feeling to be welcomed into this community. So I want to thank everyone for that. We were back together then last Thursday to greet and meet our community development candidates. We had 5 finalists, 4 of which were able to join us for the community forum. And again, despite the cold weather, we had several business owners and residents and city representatives who were able to join us and meet those candidates. We were very excited. It was a great pool. It's great to meet these people and hear about their excitement for Victoria. And I'm hopeful that by the time we meet in this forum again, you and everyone else will know who that person is and what our timeline is for bringing them on. And then my last item would be something that I will turn over to Kara shortly. Last Friday afternoon, we were approached by Carver County that they have some interest in submitting for federal funds to do some improvements on County Road 13. And they would like a letter of support from the city, which is a typical request. It's just not a typical timeline that we would be getting involved so late in the process. The deadline for this application is December 1st, so we do not meet as a city council between now and then. So what Kara and I would like to do is give you an overview of the project and the application that they're interested in. And then we don't need we don't need you to take a vote to submit that letter of support, but we'd like to get some feeling that you would like us to move ahead with that. And then we would make sure to include that in the next packet so that you've seen what's been submitted. I'll turn it over to Kara, please.
Okay, so I was happy to receive the phone call from the county. Would have liked to have had a little more time, so I just finally connected with the county traffic engineer today and have had only a brief time to review their draft application for solicitation. But they're seeking federal funds to improve County Road 13 from Highway 7 all the way down to Highway 5. For those of you who've been around a while, this is a corridor that the city receives frequent complaints on. As you get into this section heading north, there's actually a number of driveways that access directly off of the road. So people complain of a lot of near misses of people rear-ending them as they're waiting to turn into their driveway. So this has certainly been a need, I think, for the community. What they're proposing is what would be an urban, so curb and gutter, 3-lane road essentially. So you would have a center lane available for left turning movements, and then still have the ability to have right turn lanes into areas where there currently aren't right turn lanes. The other good news is that the application includes the construction of the missing lengths of trail along that corridor that I also get frequent phone calls, particularly up to Highway 7. So getting this link in here really would, if you can get yourself to the intersection of Smithtown, you can essentially then connect into the regional trail, also connect to our new trail that we constructed along Highway 5. Back in 2007, we constructed a trail. It's actually a sidewalk, but it's functioning as a trail along Smithtown Road. So it really would do a lot to help with the connectivity on the north end of the community by having that missing link put in. But yeah, the traffic concern is a very real one for the people who live along here. Now, what isn't included is like expanding it to a 4-lane major road. There's a whole lot of traffic on that corridor, but in order to expand to a 4-lane, you'd be looking at pretty significant right-of-way acquisition. And with 7 and 5 remaining 2 lanes, it doesn't necessarily do you any good to get there any faster if you can't get onto the road you're headed to any quicker. This one, so the overall project cost they're estimating to be about $6.7 million. The application would be for 80% of that to be funded with federal funds. So the local units of government would be responsible for 20%. So 20% of that is 1.3 million. The city would have a share of cost out of that 1.3 million. So out of the cost participation policy that currently exists and has existed for a long time, when the county does improvements on the county road system, the city has responsibility for costs. So typically that policy will say things like the construction of the curb and gutter costs get shifted to the city. The trail construction costs would get shifted to the city. So what they're seeking is that right now they have this, they can pick between 2017, 2018, and 2019 for a target construction year. So what we would need to do is over time need to begin to understand what our cost participation might be on this and start budgeting for it. I do think this is an important use of funds that we have, so we would maybe take a look at reprioritizing our street reconstruction program, taking a look at our long-term financial, long-term street maintenance fund to see what's in there. But more likely, the funds we would be targeting for this would be our state aid funds. So we'll be using a lot of that money for the 78th and Cochia project, but the fund builds up over time. So just very quickly looking, it looked like by 2017 we'd have 500,000 in there again. So certainly if the city had an opportunity, if the city and the county had an opportunity to leverage 5.3 million from the federal government, I think we would want to take a look at what our priorities would be and shift things around if we were so lucky to receive this funding. That's a whole lot of information, and that covers about what I know about it at this point in time with the very little time I had today to review everything. But I will take whatever questions you might have.
So from a kind of steps, progressions through this, Mount Olivet is planning some major rework. Does this, impact any of them in terms of easement acquisitions and their access, and then also kind of the same question with respect to, the residential neighbors? Are there any easement acquisitions required, and at what point do we tell or ask, gather community input relative to the whole grant submission process?
So the only place that they've preliminarily identified as there possibly being a need for easement has to deal with those missing links of trails. So when you go up there, you can see where the trail just sort of ends, and then there's what appears to be people's yards. So certainly we would want to spend some time over the next few years looking more closely at things. It's always a chicken and the egg question of, do you spend a lot of resources on something? If you don't end up getting the money, then you've sort of wasted the time. I don't have a good understanding as I sit here today as to when we find out what's awarded when, but we would want to get that information and then start to work towards a schedule, both from a budgeting perspective and then a public engagement perspective. I do think that from what I know of the residents along there, they would all be really happy to hear about potential improvements, both from a trail connection perspective and from a traffic safety perspective.
Thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead.
I was going to say, we're just looking to make sure that the council would support us submitting a letter of support, since we don't have time to bring the whole letter back to you. We certainly would provide it to you after.
And so the letter of support has no financial commitment or anything like that. My concern is, I'm in favor of the improvements, but my concern is anytime we move rapidly into something, it's not the right thing to do. And history shows that in doing those things, we've come up with issues. So, yeah, I guess I'm personally would support the letter, but we have a whole bunch of work to do.
And I think repeating kind of what Jim said, the support of the letter implies no financial commitment, contains no financial, doesn't imply, it contains no financial commitment from the city.
Right, there would be multiple opportunities to approve and commit to the project.
Can we overtly state this is not a financial commitment? We're in favor of it, but
I'm on the same page. It just feels a little bit like a blank check. Conceptually, absolutely. Sounds like all the right stuff, but without knowing some of the numbers of zeros that we're talking about, it would be hard to say, yeah, just full steam ahead if that means committing some unknown amount of money at this point.
I mean, a big surprise with congratulations, you've won, and now you owe us this amount of money. It's like,
And what Kara and I discussed earlier today was certainly at a future council meeting in the near future, we could talk about this project as if we were still in the application phase. And at that point, if you decided this isn't something that we want to go forward with, we could contact them and withdraw that little letter of support so that no one's time is wasted in review. But we felt like we would be remiss if we didn't take the opportunity to put our application in, since we just didn't have that notification that the county was interested until Friday.
And I do appreciate that there's, several years of potential construction time zones for us to pick from, so we could plug it in and program it and approach it methodically, but again, without making a definite commitment today.
Absolutely.
Joe?
I guess my question would be is, where does this rank on the priority list? It seems to me that we're just chasing the money because we can quote unquote get free money. And I want to know where this ranks on all the other roads, because when we do this one, we're saying no to the other ones.
Yeah, that's certainly information I have available that I could bring back. Had I, when we did our street reconstruction update, I think that we need to kind of take a step back and have some communication with the county as to what their priorities are, so that I can make sure we're aligning our street reconstruction dollars with what their priorities might be, so that we're interacting a little cleaner.
Is the proportion negotiable, or is it
Our experience has not been that the cost participation policy is open to considerable debate. And I'm sure you've dealt with it extensively in Chanhassen.
Kind of for the reasons I said with the post office. If they change it for one, then they're saying they're open to debate in the future, and it's much easier to have a clean policy and abide by it.
So is it the full 1.3 roughly million would be the city portion? Or
No,
is
it'll
that
be some
shared?
smaller portion of that. Kate thought off the top of her head, maybe it's like 20% of that 20%. So you're talking, $300,000, which certainly, if we have 500,000 in state aid funds. Marsh Lake Road was the other state aid priority we've been talking about, but the county also has to fund that. So I really do need to set up a time to kind of sit down with them and talk through where they see that as a priority compared to this one. In terms of our current residents, this road gets a lot of traffic.
So you need nothing up more from us?
The head nods are sufficient.
That was the discussion we were looking for. Thank you.
Yep. I support. I was just saying I support. I mean, if you need us to all chime in.
The correspondence, did you want to comment on any?
Yeah, the correspondence section of your packet will be something or returning, depending on how long you've been on the council, that you'll see in the packet. The city and I receive a large amount of correspondence that doesn't require any action, isn't necessarily worthy of a full council item or presentation, but might be of interest to you or to members of the public. And this is a good place, in addition, to just retain that information as a public record. So typically, the correspondence section will not require any discussion unless there's something you see that catches your eye. Or as in tonight, we have received a special recognition that I want to make sure that we take a moment to stop and realize our achievement. The Government Finance Officers Association has awarded us a certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And that award goes to both the City of Victoria and specifically to Finance Manager Kelly Grinnell. This is not the first time that the city has received the award, but it's not any less work from year to year to apply for it. What you do is you submit your comprehensive annual financial report, your CAFR, to an impartial panel of judges. These are members of the GFOA, other finance directors and CFOs and the like that volunteer their time. They go through these CAFRs, and I apologize, I didn't memorize the sentence, but it's a good one. They look to make sure that our CAFR demonstrates a constructive spirit of full disclosure to clearly communicate the financial story of the City of Victoria. And Kelly and her staff and our audit firm have to go, they have to include additional information. It makes it a better document for you to use, it makes it a better document for the public to look at, but it's not something that's required. It's something that takes a little bit of extra effort, and even then you're not guaranteed that you will receive this award. So I want to make sure that we took the time to recognize Kelly for doing that, and just make sure that we were aware that that's an important achievement.
Congratulations.
Congratulations,
Kelly.
I'd just like to say, Kelly, since we've been working with you, it's been tremendous from a financial standpoint. In terms of our ability to understand, or speaking for myself, the ability to understand what's happening with city's finances, and when we have questions, your ability to go right to bring the answers right up. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to work with you and your staff.
And anybody wants to understand, get a glimpse of how complicated it is, take a look and ask her to spend 15 minutes explaining the long-term financial plan and all the variables that go into that spreadsheet, those spreadsheets. It's an amazing activity, and it's clearly well done, so, and well-deserved award. So thank you.
I just want to comment too, I actually use the one that you published in Victoria's Spirit. That's I think that's the popular, I'm not sure what the popular financial, whatever the official word is. I actually use that with my clients to talk through how to be transparent and really show where the dollar is spent, like in total comp or other components that they're trying to explain to their people and their organizations. So I've been like, well, here's an example of how you explain, one of the most complex pieces I know, which is city government, financials, and how we did it there. And so just wanted to say thank you.
Anything else, Lori?
That concludes my report. Thank you.
All right, we're time for reports of the mayor, city council members, attorney, and committees. Council members have anything?
No report.
No report.
Bob?
No, Mayor, thank you.
I've got one thing I want to just touch on. Earlier tonight, we went through the 2015 budget exercise, and Kelly presented a dozen slides. And any budget process is a somewhat inexact science. There's always something that'll happen in the course of a year that you didn't anticipate. Part of the art in that whole process is to try to anticipate as many shocks to the system as you can. And so there are some that are pretty obvious. The Lake Wasserman, that legal matter, that could end up being a very costly item. When the watershed district gets around to redefining or defining the rules for stormwater dredging and treatment, that could have a huge impact on our budget situation. And something else that the citizens ought to be aware of. There's a lawsuit now pending against 4 of the city council members. Our legal fees are being paid for by the League of Minnesota Cities through an insurance policy that provides up to $200,000 for the defense of all 4 of us. I'm one of the ones that's subject to the complaint. So there's a $200,000 threshold of insurance that's provided by the League of Minnesota Cities. If the legal expenses exceed that amount, we are potentially individually liable. There is a provision in the law that allows the city to absorb expenses over and above the $200,000 should it get to that point. As of today, the cost of our defense is about $130,000. There's a trial scheduled for March 3rd, If, as I add that up, that's another maybe 2 or 3 months of legal support. It is possible that our defense could end up costing appropriately more than $200,000, and then I'm not prejudging how the vote would go, but it would come to the council, any expense over and above the $200,000 would come as a question to the council, and the council would have the opportunity to oblige the city to pick up those expenses. I just want to make sure people are aware, this is still, it's in the hopper. Should it come to that, we've worked with Kelly, there are ways to fund that should it be necessary. I think clearly our hope is that it's not necessary. But as of the moment, sitting here on November 24th, it's not clear, so just want to let everybody be, as there are other, they said the Lake Wasserman legal proceeding could be a big hit. What are, and I showed a lift station, all we need is a lift station to go, and that's $150,000 plus or minus. So, anybody else, if you have any may want to make a comment? So much for the budgeting process. A couple other items. The VBA is running the usual Christmas in downtown Victoria on December 6th. And I guess we're closed on Thanksgiving and the day after that, Thursday and Friday, as well as on December 24th and 25th. The City Hall, the planned move-in date, are we committed yet to the date we talked about, or?
We are targeting now the week of Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, so starting Monday is the current plan.
And that makes sense?
We would typically be closed on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We did look at moving in starting that weekend, but we would incur some overtime costs from the moving companies and some premium charges. And so we'll do our best to minimize the disruption to public service the remainder of that week. It may be a little bit more difficult for walk-in clients, but we'll make sure that we have good phone and email access.
And Martin Luther King Jr. Day holiday is January 20?
19th.
19th?
That sounds right.
19th, so we should be up and running, fully functioning.
By the
January
first meeting in
20th.
February. Yeah, and the library would plan to begin to have their shelving and equipment delivered the week following, so that last week in January. And then I'm sure they don't want me to say this because they don't want the extra pressure, but they'd like to soft open the last week in February, first week in March. And then by the time Eastern Carver County Schools has their spring break the last week of March, they'd like to have everything smooth sailing so that they're ready for those crowds. But nobody quote me on that.
And you mentioned earlier, or somebody mentioned earlier about if you haven't had a chance to see the building, we ought to take advantage of taking a walkthrough. Is no less an expert than my 4-year-old grandson said, it looks like an office building. And it really does when you get inside. So we're getting close. Anything else? Somebody want to make a motion and we'll adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've adjourned.